All right, we got a few minutes left. Getting ready to do Tech Talk Tuesday. Harvey, Dean, David, Tom. This is me being retired. Isn't it great to be retired, like Harvey said? Thought it was funny. Roger. Hogs going wild. Looks like we're getting a good little crowd gathered up. It's going to talk about a little bit about some important engine building numbers that we use. Deck height is one of them. That's very important. And about the end gaps on the rings and why. Why we have the deck heights we have and why we have the ring end gaps we have. So whenever it's after 6. Hi guys, hey Tim. Sorry I keep kicking this stand. I want to do better, I promise. Roy. Has anybody got an official time yet? Tim, Dave? Is it close to 6 o'clock? I know it's close. But when I'm recording live on my phone, no, I'm not recording. I am broadcasting live on my cell phone, Jim and Anthony. I want to tell you guys that I don't get to see the clock on here while I'm doing it. I don't understand it. I guess you know how much fun I have with a cell phone. I can degree a cam and ride a bike, but cell phone's a challenge for me. Young folks do good with the cell phones, so we need young folks to help us with these things. But I'm here at the shop all by myself. Everybody went home. The young folks and the old folks, everybody went home. Hey, Scott and Daryl, Nat. I don't have any really good background stuff to see. I decided to put the old 1963 pegboard up behind the stuff I'm going to talk about instead of letting you see how busy my shop is. If anybody here ever tries to get in touch with me or call Star Racing Power or call me and you can't get an answer, never mind someone or a recording, I want to say that thankfully we're not avoiding you, but thankfully we are busy. We got shop work, we got customers lined up, we got clients lined up, and I'm very thankful for it, you guys. So I talked to a gentleman on the phone today from Massachusetts, and he was going to get his engine done and get his bike done. And he said his wife gave him a hard time because he called 3 times and couldn't get me on the phone. So I'm thankful that now in my career and after the history and all the time, 40 some odd years in this business, that my time is in demand, and I don't take it lightly and I don't abuse it as much as you might think I do. And she was fussing at him like, "Are you going to spend money?" Hey, Scott. Hey, Jonathan, Brandon, John, Don. I'm going to spend. You're going to spend money with this guy, and he won't even talk to you on the phone. No, it's just that you can't even. Yes, you can. Anyway, we get overrun with tire kickers, and I love tire kickers. I've been a tire kicker too. Whenever I'm getting ready to buy something, I'm a tire kicker. I guarantee you, when I look at a new trailer, I'll go over and kick the tires. And it might not be really kicking the tires, but it might be something like tire kicking. Like I'm going to look at obvious things or unobvious things, and I might even ask dumb questions, especially about a cell phone. Can you imagine a 25-year-old technician at a cell phone store, and I go in there at 65 years old, and I'm going to act like I know what I'm doing, or I'm going to act like a savvy buyer? No, that's not me. And I feel sorry for 100% right in the middle of retail business. It's tough business because the internet and these cell phones and Facebook and Instagram have just about wrecked real tech. So that's why today I am spending a good bit of time these days on Instagram and on Facebook while I can, because we are getting work run through our shop. And like I said, I'm very thankful for it. I know that that's a blessing that we should all love. I mean, let me tell you, the alternative to being too busy is no work. And no work is horrible. Too busy is always better. The bad part about being too busy is when everybody gets a good promise out of you, and you're too busy to keep a promise. So let me tell everybody, please be wary of your promises. Tire kicking. Be wary of your promises. Only promise things you can do. And that's why it's hard for somebody to call me up, spend a lot of time and say, hey, man, will you guarantee me my bike will go into eights if I spend all this money with you? I said, no, I can't. I can't guarantee your bike will go into eights. It's hard to guarantee it to make how much power, but if I know how to make more power, that would be a great experiment. But we try really hard to over-deliver and under-promise. Let me see if that sounded right. Over-deliver and under-promise. No, over-deliver and over-promise. That's so funny, y'all. Laugh at me because I'm goofing up because it's live. If I promise you 150 horsepower, I'm going to try really hard to give you 155. And if I promise you that it's going to cost $10,000, I'm going to hope it comes out to 9,500. That's what I'm trying to say. It's all perception. I had a good conversation with Anthony yesterday about perception and the way we learn. But before I waste a whole bunch of time on all that stuff, let's talk about some engine rules. One that's really important here at Star Racing, two of them, is the deck height. And you wonder, what is the deck height? Well, some of you engine builders know, and you guys reading on the internet and read some of the books. Deck height, is my opinion, is how close the piston gets to the head. And we can't really measure that in a dynamic situation unless you run it and take it apart and look at it, or run it and take it apart and look at it. So we come up with, over time, a static measurement, which would be how far the piston comes up in the hole of the cylinder at TDC. Does it come only 2/1000ths below deck? Is it 2/1000ths above deck? But there's so many parts that are important that gets left off. And that's how much compression height the piston has. That's from the center of the wrist pin to the top of the piston. So you got to get that number, and it's got to be ironed out, and you got to figure it out. Then the base gasket that goes under the cylinders on these, they're saying my audio's coming in and out. That must mean a poor signal. Well, I'm really sorry about that. Let me check real quick and see about my signal. Hold on hold please. All right, can anybody hear me now? Did I lose anybody? It says for some reason your audio is coming in and out. I have to look, I guess, so I'll know that. Somebody give me an amen or something if you hear me. Sounds good, okay. I want to look at the router one time, see if it's all lit up. Hold one moment, I'm looking. Yeah, it says I'm good, so I don't know what that's from. Anyway, I'm going to spin through this little deal a little bit and show you what deck height looks like, okay? This is a twin cam, 124, and I'm just rolling it over. Turns over really nice. And when the piston comes to the top, the deck height is how far the top of the piston is to the deck. And our goal, is to run it as close as we can without the piston hitting the head. We want the piston to get as close as we can. So the thickness of the base gasket, which goes under the cylinders, if you can see me here, there's a little gasket that goes between the cylinder block. On a V8, we don't have that. On the V-twins and some of the motorcycle engines, we have it. So in my hand here, Cometic makes us different thickness base gaskets, so we can dial in our deck. Here's a 30 thou thick base gasket. Here's a 20. Here's a 10. And here's a 14. Okay? In order to get the number we want, we'll jockey some of those measurements around. We also have different thickness head gaskets. We have 30 thou, we have 40 thou, we have 45s, we have 60s. We have different thickness head gaskets, so we can get the correct clearance between the piston and the head. Now, another way to do it is we measure the deck height, which I'll show you in a minute. We might take the cylinder off and put it in the lathe and cut the bottom of the cylinder, spin a 2 or 3 thou off the bottom of the cylinder to get the clearance we want. Now, all of this is part of engine blueprinting. And what we do is we take the time to make sure that we have the piston as close to the head as we can get it without touching. Now, my friend that raced the pro stock motorcycles, the Harley V-twins and the Buell S&S 160s are running over 10,000 RPM with those engines now. And it gives us this where the piston can actually hit the head. So you have to create clearance there. And on a steel rod engine, normally aspirated, we're going to shoot for about 40 thousandths piston to head, about 40 thousandths. That's really, really skinny. And we use this gauge to check deck. And you always make sure it's 0, just like you would a vernier caliper or anything. You got to set your mics to 0. So if you find a precision piece, a piece of steel, I use a mill table or the table on the SERTI machine. This flywheel right here is very nice and true, and you can move this gauge all around, and I set it to 0. So when it's at 0, I can put it over here on the engine. Oops. Nobody got hurt. My wrench fell off the crank. And I can spin this over. It wasn't my gauge that crashed. It was just the wrench. So I don't know if you can see this, but this piston right here, with me pushing down on this hard, centered on this piston, I am at plus 2 deck height. Okay, so if I used a 40 thousandths head gasket, that would be, the piston to head clearance would be 38 thousandths, because my piston is positive 2 thousandths. So I can put a thicker base gasket on and get it to dead on 40, or I can cut the bottom of the cylinder and get it dead on 40. Is anybody catching me so far? Low network connection. That is so sad. I see it keeps jumping. I'm going to move my phone. Hang on. Let's see if I can get a better connection. Hold still, everyone. I'm going to move the pedestal. I can get about 4 feet closer to the phone. Let's see if that cleans up the action a little bit. These metal buildings, forgive me, but inside these metal buildings, sometimes cell service is a real challenge. All right, somebody see this now? Tell me they see it. I'm back on. I don't know how current I am. I see Curtis and Matt and Terry. But if somebody sees this good view now, holler at me. Okay, you guys got me. Thank you for letting me know that. All right, let's check the rear cylinder now. Push down on it real nice. This one is +1. So the front's +2 and the rear is +1. Now that came from blueprinting these clearances, you guys. We checked it. We milled the bottom of these cylinders, and we got the exact right base gasket. This is an 18 thousandths base gasket, so we got great clearances here. So now we can put a 40 thousandths head gasket on it, and this will run really good. Now, normally aspirated, that's a goal. With aluminum rods, we get a lot more extension, thermal growth in the rods and stuff, so we have to add more piston to head clearance. So one more thing that gets lost a lot, you guys, is this aluminum head and this aluminum cylinder and aluminum block, when they get hot, when they get 200 or 300 degrees, all of this expands and it gets longer and longer. That's why we have to put a real clamp load on our head bolts, because the head bolts are like a spring. We tighten them up till they stretch. And when this gets hot, all this stuff expands. And it's easy to scoot a gasket out from under here when you got a lot of pressure in here and this thing's really expanding. Same thing happens with valve lash. We have to be really careful to get our valve lash to where when the cylinders and heads get hot and the heads grow, the push rods are still the same length. So we gain a lot of lash right here. So we have to be careful with that too. Now, our clearances, like on an aluminum rod, we might run 55 thousandths piston ahead. So you have to juggle all this with the compression height of the piston, the cylinder length, the base gasket, and the head gasket thickness to get there. Now, another really important part is the rings, okay? A couple of points I want to make. We only use nice, high dollar, high quality rings. There are rings on the market. There's pistons on the market. There's parts out there that are really cheap. And I know that 90% or maybe 88 or 92% of people really do price shopping. And there are some people out there that are selling some really inferior parts at cheap prices. Like I see ring sets for $10 and I see pistons for $100. 2 pistons for $200 and 2 rings for two sets of rings for 2 cylinders for $20. Okay? I've done a lot of shopping on this, you guys, and I've used a lot of parts. The best rings that we can buy, even if they cost $50 a cylinder, that's $100 for a set of rings. And the nicest pistons, we use custom pistons made to suit us. And we'll shop and find some nice pistons too on the market. But listen, the cheapest piston in the world is $200 a set. And the most expensive, nicest pistons in the world are $600 a set for 2. That's $300 a piece versus $100 a piece. So that total savings that you get with the cheapest rings and the cheapest pistons on a $10,000 or $6,000 engine, you will save a total of $480 over the finest parts you can buy. So in my opinion, is you ought to jump for higher quality rings and higher quality pistons. And of course, the bore and hone job is really important too. A lot of people do that cheap. I see where you can buy bore and hones. You can buy cylinders, you can buy pistons, and you can buy rings, and you can get the whole kit for about $800. I'm gonna tell you something. I don't want it. We've never won any races with the cheapest stuff. We've never won any trophies with the cheapest stuff, and we've never won any business with the cheapest stuff. If you're shopping for the lowest price you can get, we don't offer it. We don't want to do the most. We want to do the best. So we work really hard to be the best, not the most. Results matter, and a lot of times you have to have good parts to get good results. Now back to this end gap deal. I don't know. Let's turn this camera a little bit and let you see the little grinder. We use this ring grinder. Put the rings in here, and we spin it up. And we'll cut this gap to the clearance we want. Why is that so important? Same as the end gap. Same as the deck height, okay? We'll put this ring in. We'll square it up. I have a ring squaring tool that we use when this is not together. And then I'll spin this down out of the way. And then we'll take a feeler gauge and we'll go in there and measure this gap. Why would you have a gap there? Well, it's because sitting here in the shop, if you have, say, a 20 thousandths end gap here in the end of the rings, where the ring grows when it gets hot, it gets to operating temperature, believe it or not, this ring gets longer in circumference. This piece of steel gets hot, or a piece of cast iron gets hot, ductile iron, it grows in length. And when this grows in length, these two ends touch. And when they touch, they start losing seal, they get hot, they burn up because you can't keep a seal on it when these butt. So we have to measure it. Now that static measurement of say 4 thousandths per inch of bore or 4.5 thousandths per inch of bore are just guidelines that the ring manufacturer and the piston manufacturers recommends for you based on experience so that these don't butt. Now if they tell you to put it at let's say if you do the math at, say, 5 thousandths per inch, depending on your fuel, nitrous, turbo, or whatever, 6 thousandths per inch or 8 thousandths per inch. Some people tell you to run even more with a supercharger. But the reason it's more is because the cylinder temperature is so hot and the piston temperature is so hot that these rings grow in length, and you got to give them more room because they grow and butt. When it's running at peak temperature, at peak RPM, and peak pressure, you want this to be almost zero, maybe 2 thou gap. All right? How can you get that? Well, you got to give it room to grow. So all of your rings need to be custom fit. They're end gaps. We've set the top ring at one special clearance given your engine application and your cylinder size and ring size. We do the second ring to a different number so we get the results we want out of that oil scraper. And then the oil ring, we set the rails at really small because they don't get any temperature to them like the top ring and the second ring. But the 3-piece oil ring scrapes the oil off the cylinders and returns it back into the sump. The second ring gets what's left, and it also helps cool the piston a little bit. The top ring does all the sealing, and it does the majority of the cooling, because the piston doesn't really touch the cylinder except through this ring. So when this ring is really sealed to the piston, the temperature that's glowing red in the top of that piston crown is dissipating its heat through this ring into the cylinder wall, and then therefore it dissipates out of the fins. So that's part of the measurements that matter. In gap, cylinder clearance. Now, what piston to wall clearance? People asking me that. Piston to wall clearance is the least amount you can run without transferring material. Loose, where it rocks in here hard, wears out pretty quick and can't control the pressure or the oil, and you have a pretty sloppy engine that runs hot. So you want minimum clearance here. And guess what? The pistons are made out of 4 different materials. You have a hyper-eutectic word that I can't even say. Never learned how to say it. Never really don't use it. And then we have 4032 alloy aluminum, and we have, 2618? Something like that. I can't remember right off the top of my head. Trying to be smart and call numbers off the top of my head. And then, of course, sand cast pistons or high-pressure cast pistons. They all have different expansion rates. They all grow at different lengths. Different sizes. So you got to put different clearance on them depending on the ring size. Also, the use of the cylinder. What is the engine for? What is the reason? If it's supercharged or turbocharged or nitrous oxide injected, you're going to have to give it more clearance because the expansion rate of the materials is bigger and the pistons get hotter. Learned a lot about that over the years. So maybe I can take a break right here right quick, and I'm going to bring this down a notch so I can read it. I want to see how current we are, you guys. Got a few minutes left, and I wanted to try and spend a moment with an question and answer session. So, how far behind are you guys? I got Kelly, Michael, and Daniel. All right, who's on that's not speaking up right at this moment? I see we got a pretty good crowd. It's over 100 watching. I know we're going to save this and put it on YouTube, so it's not for everybody. While I'm waiting on someone to answer, I see you guys, we have the gear drive cam set up. That's really nice. It gets rid of the timing chain. It gets rid of the tensioners. And people say that it's noisy. Well, most of the people that tell you it's noisy haven't had one, because they don't make noise to me. If they do, it's very low, and it goes along with the RPM. And but the reason the factory uses the chain and the tensioners is because it's silent. So the little silent chain is the goal. There's noise, not how good it works or not. So the gear drive works really great on these engines. It's pretty hard to beat. You can see the little gear on the crankshaft, and you can see the big gear on the camshaft. The little gear turns, if the engine's turning 7,000, the little gear is turning 7,000. The big gear, where the cams are, is only turning 3,500. It runs 2-to-1 ratio. So the camshaft goes half the speed of the crankshaft on all of those engines. That's just how it works, because the crankshaft has to go around 720 degrees to get all 4 strokes in. And I know that's pretty elementary for some folks, but there it is. Now, is there a calculation relevant to temperature to expansion ratio? That's a good question. Yeah, there is. What temperature specific are you talking about? The center of the cylinder, the center of the piston, the exhaust side of the piston, or the intake side of the piston versus where? What RPM? What point in the run? Are you talking about a 500-mile race, an endurance race? Are you talking about drag racing or at the finish line? Yes, there is. But the only way that we know to get that right is to have experience. Run it, take it apart, and inspect it. Run it, take it apart, and inspect it. We run an engine and set records and go fast, and the pistons didn't touch the head. We're going to tighten it up on a normally aspirated engine, and we're going to get the pistons a little closer to the head, maybe 1 or 2 thou till it bumps a little bit. And do I prefer steel or aluminum rods in Pro Stock? I prefer steel rods always on anything, but I have so many people in here watching that believe aluminum rods is the only way. And Top Fuel, funny car, yeah, maybe. maybe some Pro Mod stuff, maybe they need it, but steel rods are just way more consistent and they last longer, and they don't have to be as massive. An aluminum rod has to be almost twice the girth to get the strength in there. So it's and folks think aluminum rods gives you more power. If it's in neutral, I know this is going to sound stupid, but if you got your engine in neutral or you got the clutch disengaged and you go, wow, light parts, light wrist pins, light cranks, light wrist pins, I already said that, light pistons, all that stuff reacts so quickly that it revs quicker and deaccelerates quickly. But that's not how it really runs down the track. We are in a slow move when we're going through the gears. I mean, just think about the guys at NASCAR run Daytona. They come out of turn 4 going 8,800, and at the end of the straightaway they're going 8,850 or 8,900. They got 100 RPM rise or fall. The light parts just don't do it, man. It's hard to measure. Chassis dyno shows that stuff because it's just weight, but it'll sure fool you. Going down the racetrack, some heavy parts that keep it straight and round and parallel and keep the seal makes more power than the lightweight parts. So you got to have enough strength in there. That's us with cylinder walls. I see every day people are putting 128s and 130 bolt-in kits in Milwaukee 8s on a 107 or a 114 or a 117. The cases are only bored out big enough to get such a size like a 2300, a 4350 or a 4360 cylinder sleeve OD. And when you get that big and then you just keep boring it out, and you're adding cubic inches, eventually you've got more cubic inches than you can control and seal. And I'm not talking about with power. I'm talking about pressure and temperature. You need a substantial cylinder wall thickness. You need a substantial OD and ID of the cylinder in order to contain that pressure. And I'm not talking about, okay, everybody knows there's more horsepower for bigger engines, supposedly. But you can get so big and where cubic inches is your only goal, you'll lose sight of how to control the pressures and the dimensions. You got to stay round and you got to stay straight in order to make any power. So a stout 124 will outperform a weak 128 or 130 every day. That's why I'm not real worried about the rules when they changed from the 124 Harley class to the 131. That's a little bit of difference, but it's not enough to worry about. Like I said, a stout 124, I run with it every time. Any more other questions? I say I'm just about out of time again. I really appreciate you guys hanging in there and trying to keep this going. Got one more Tech Talk Tuesday before Christmas, so I'll reserve that to tell you guys Merry Christmas and happy holidays. If you send me some questions, I don't just take only guy that asks a question. What oil and what viscosity do we run? We run every different one. 2050 is the thickest we run. 10 weight's the thinnest we run. Really depends on the application and what oil temperature we're going to run. If you're going to run a lot of temperature, you got to have some viscosity there. One thing I don't like about 50 weight oil is it has to get hot before it starts working. 50 weight oil in a Harley is pretty brutal on the engine parts because heavy oil doesn't flow when it's thick. It only flows when it's thin. So that's how we see it. I see can gapless rings be used in turbocharged applications? I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it. Yes, you can. You can run them. I'm just saying I wouldn't do it. I like having a more conventional ring that we can control with gaps. And we do take our engines apart a lot. Customer stuff that we're going to run 100,000 miles, we don't take them apart. But listen to me, those numbers, those measurements, and those experiences didn't come overnight. They came from over 40 years experience learning what clearances we need, what materials we need, and the end gaps and the deck heights and all that stuff. So there's a lot of opinion here. Please, you guys, understand. A lot of opinion. And everybody has one of those. I have engine heroes on here. I have smart people on here watching. I see their names float by. Some people go by anonymously, and when I record this and post it again, I won't even see them at all. I don't care about that. It doesn't bother me. My competitor's opinion to me is none of my business. And that's worth saying again. My competitor's opinion of me is none of my business. And we learn the hard way. We pass it on to you. And I've been blessed by the good Lord to be able to retain information, to experience things that we can use for our advantage. And Please don't catch me saying this is the only way to do it. It's not. There are many ways to skin a cat. There's many different methods, many different styles, just like cars. There's every kind of car for every kind of person. I had a car builder tell me one time, he said, there's a fanny for every seat. So you have a favorite engine builder that you trust and you believe in, and he's got his own methods and styles. I'm not arguing with him, and I'm not trying to prove him wrong. I'm just explaining the way we think and how we do stuff, and we are very thankful. So, again, Merry Christmas. I'll tell you again later. Good job, you guys, for watching this. Please send me info. Please send me messages. Email george@starracing.com. george@starracing.com. I have lots more information. I've only shared with you 20 weeks of stuff, and I think I've got 40 some odd years worth of weeks left to share stuff. Oh, and last thing, you guys, I'm not sick. I'm not dying no more than normal. I've been dying since I was born, but I'm 65 now. I'm in really great health. I feel good. I feel healthy. I went out to the drag strip yesterday afternoon and I ran 2 customers' bikes, made 6 good hard laps. Feel great. I'm only sharing because it's the right thing to do. And I got a message from above, I guess, a while back that when I'm gone, all this info is going down the drain. So I'm not sharing because I'm sick. Roger Edgerton asked me one time, he said, man, people are saying something's wrong with George. He's giving away secrets. I'm not giving away secrets. I'm just sharing stuff I know that I think would help. And people ask me questions every day, and I'm very interested in your perception and what you think about that stuff. Not how my competitors say I'm wrong. That's the part I mean about their opinions, none of my business. But you guys, my friends and my clients, I'm very interested in what you think. And I would love to share more about that with you, what I think, and I would love to know what you think. So get back to me. Share. I will. May God bless you guys. Look after each other. And I am very thankful for you. Good night.